October the 20th, 2021, and I would well, I'd address an issue that's kind of had a lot of play in the last few days and having to do with the Chinese missiles test, the so-called hypersonic weapon. And there's a lot of misinformation going on in the public discussion about this. To kind of go through a few of the things that were involved here. Okay, first of all, okay, it's really not the same class as what's generally referred to as hypersonic. The United States, for example, has been developing some hypersonic missiles too, which are basically air-launched missiles that travel above 5 times the speed of sound through the air, and then they hit the target. And I guess the general idea of it is that they can overcome a defense system because they're moving so fast the defense system doesn't have time to react. I think that's the essential idea of why you're using that rather than, let's just say, a supersonic or maybe even a subsonic missile, because there's a sort of a detection versus fly-out time issue of defense systems anyway. Point is, you want all the details how that works, but that's one type of thing. Well, this is actually basically an orbital projectile, like putting up a satellite. And the essential idea here is that it would then come down. Of course, it's coming down at hypersonic velocities, as do modern ballistic missile warheads from ICBMs. So anyhow, that's essentially what's going on here. And I don't know that it's quite the hullabaloo everybody is kind of getting. I mean, after all, Russia's tested a similar system a while back. And so it's not as new as that. I guess the idea just indicates to people that, yes, the Chinese are a competitor now. They do have high technology, and there's somebody to be dealt with. By the way, if you like these videos, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a like, which helps out with the algorithm. And, of course, any comments would be appreciated. I've got a lot of discussion here. It'll be kind of good. Okay, let me get back to this thing here. Like I said, okay, so the thing that I think is misleading here is the idea that this is, some grand achievement. I mean, as I understood, the thing actually, according to what was reported, missed the target by about 20 miles, which, I mean, even with a contemporary nuclear warhead, that's kind of a miss. I mean, not to say it wouldn't be able to create a nuclear detonation and problems, but I'm just saying that's not up to standard for modern missiles. I think we're achieving something on the order, from what I've heard in open literature, and I have no sensitive literature, what's being reported is somewhere approaching 600 feet CEP with our ICBMs and Trident II SLBMs, something in that range. So this is kind of not that great, okay? I mean, this isn't really even great by the standards of a few decades ago. Why it is concerning is, okay, they talk about we can penetrate our ballistic missile defense system. Yeah, and I think the regular ICBMs probably could too. Remember that we don't have much of a ballistic missile defense system. I mean, we've been strong adherents over many decades to the now defunct ABM treaties of 1972. What we have constructed is a ballistic missile defense system which is primarily geared against Korea. The thought being that Korea was testing an ICBM a few years back, and the idea is, well, they also have nuclear weapons now. And they apparently even tested thermonuclear devices that are well above 100 kilotons. So they're in the game, you might say. And if they were to construct an ICBM with a warhead, they could hit us with a few missiles maybe. And the idea is we have constructed a defense system against that, which certainly isn't designed to be effective against the Russian system or the Chinese systems, really. If a conflict with China were to occur right now, yes, we would presumably try to use what we have and intercept as many as we could, but it's not really going to protect us that much. Okay. Okay, just want to emphasize that. So the fact that they can fly, but at any rate, getting back to the hypersonic test they did the other day, a vehicle that size could fly through the low altitude. It goes to low altitude orbit, sort of like a very, very low flying satellite, one that's just skimming the outer atmosphere. And then at the appropriate point, it descends into the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, way above the speeds probably of the hypersonic missiles I was talking about earlier, and then goes down and attacks its target. And presumably, if you're going to spend a system like this with a nuclear warhead, it's way too inaccurate for conventional warheads to be effective. So, yes, that's perhaps not a good development. On the other hand, they're sacrificing a lot of accuracy and other capabilities for that. See, a normal ICBM goes up in a high ballistic parabolic type or arc and goes up hundreds of miles before it comes down, which gives a radar system time to detect it and to track it. Now, another thing this would let you do also is it might evade a lot of radar detection. Now, our satellites that detect launches based on infrared would, of course, be able to determine a launch had occurred, but it might be hard to get the second indicator in time that you want on, that okay, the missile is actually inbound and determine where it's heading to. Is it heading to us? Is it heading to somebody else, right? And so that's kind of important too in your decisions of what to do. What it might accomplish would be an attack on command and control. That is particularly the political control, the president, if you will, the vice president, which is the legal authority for nuclear use. So in other words, if you could knock them out with a surprise attack while not really damaging much of anything else to begin with, it might stall our response, or who knows, in principle, we don't know what it would do actually, because beyond the president and the vice president, we don't know exactly who else actually has physical access to the ability to respond. I mean, there are some idiosyncrasies in this system. Maybe I might get into that a little bit later, but why I'm saying this. But at any rate, this poses a threat in that sense too. But remember, the Russians also have a similar capability. So, and the fact that we don't have one is basically because we haven't really wanted one. We didn't have a requirement to build it. I'm sure we could have probably built one 20 years ago. I don't think it's beyond our technology. It's just a requirement we didn't have and probably didn't see a need for, since we probably aren't thinking of doing that kind of an attack on anybody. If in fact that's what this is. Now the Chinese are denying this whole story, and they're claiming it was just a test of a satellite that kind of went wrong and a piece fell off of it and burned up in the atmosphere. I'll post a link to an article which discusses both points of view in it, and you can choose for yourself. I think, given the fact it seems like this is a leak from the intelligence community, we probably have to err a little bit on the side of caution to believe this really is what a hypersonic glide vehicle, like they're saying. Well, it indicates obviously that the Chinese are engaged in an area of advanced risk taking and so forth. I think part of the problem that this all got started to some degree because our breakdown in relationship with the Russians has gotten pretty severe, and particularly I think it got severe when it got political, where the Democrats tried to use it against Trump, and therefore Trump had to take stronger measures in order to show he wasn't in league or wasn't being blackmailed by the Russians, which, by the way, he wasn't, and therefore we probably over-sanctioned the Russians for things that, in some ways, and so our whole idea of any kind of arms control relationship is kind of breaking down. The Chinese never were in such a regime, and of course they're emerging power. Actually, what I find far more disturbing than this particular weapon is the fact that they're in the process of building a large number, well over 100 missile silos in western China, and I get the feeling that they're about to break out from their minimal deterrence point of view and actually become a near-peer nuclear power. And this kind of falls in line with things. I mean, for years, the Chinese didn't compete because they didn't have the economy to compete. They probably felt anything they did would only lead to a more severe defense reaction from the U.S. And so they simply built what you might call a minimal deterrent. A nuclear capability that if they were attacked, they probably could put a few warheads on us, and the idea of just having a few warheads hit us is generally would mean that we wouldn't launch an aggressive war against them. After all, who wants to have a nuclear warhead go off on your country, right? It's still going to kill potentially hundreds of thousands of people and create radioactive contamination and so forth. And so they weren't playing in that game. But now, apparently, their economy and their technology, a lot of which was stolen by espionage, by the way, is now up to a level where they can actually build it. And look at both the United States and back in the former Soviet Union, both in a period of roughly 5 years, went from a relatively small number of ICBMs to all over 1,000 in a very short period of time of about 5 years in both cases. In the case of the Soviets was their SS-11 missiles, and the United States was our Minuteman force. So and the thing is, we're not producing any ICBMs at all right now. We have a program to develop a replacement for the Minuteman ICBM, but we really, have so downsized our forces that any quick reaction would be very limited. In fact, the best thing we could probably do would be to deploy more warheads on the existing system, since we've downsized to one warhead on each of the Minutemen. But another problem with this is that it would decrease the range for a Minuteman, and we might want to have that range in order to reach China, particularly if we want to use a non-polar trajectory. And remember, if we're firing missiles at China over the North Pole, over Russia first, we don't know how Russia would react to that. They may assume they're under attack and launch under attack, and the whole thing would escalate into a Russia and China both against us scenario, as an example. So you can see that there's real complications in this, and our blind arms control policies of the last 20 years have really left us in a position where we're now potentially facing two nuclear powers, and the combination of both of them will have higher capabilities. So that is a factor that's kind of been ignored in, I think, the whole thing. While we got distracted by the the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and spent way too much money and lives on that, we were allowing more important issues kind of slip away from us, I think. But anyhow, that's just kind of my view on the subject. So I'm not as wildly alarmed by this development of a vehicle of that sort, although it does sort of pose certain challenges, and we'll probably put a higher emphasis on our space-based systems, which themselves may come under some kind of vulnerability, which of course is one of the reasons why we created the Space Force, to emphasize the space-based detection and other systems. So anyhow, just kind of a rundown on what I think about the subject. At any rate, on the other hand, I guess this is stirring up a little bit of focus on an issue that really has been too neglected for a long time. And so I'll wrap this up for now. I guess another thing I'll mention quickly, and of course, our ongoing budget battles are ongoing. So all we know is that Manchin and Bernie Sanders are talking to each other. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Probably bad. I hope they don't come to any suitable agreement, or any agreement they come to will hopefully be unacceptable to progressives in the House. But that's that. So at any rate, I'll wrap this up for now. Like I say, my links to my social media are below, also in the description. Until next time.